we met, I usually kept the notes and prepared the reports. I'm happy to continue doing that. If you would like to take that over, you certainly can do so, but
It's okay.
okay. I just wanted to
If you
not
need a,
assume that you wanted me to do that.
yeah, if you ever need a break, I could maybe halfway after I get into it.
All right, sounds good. Well, very good. So, just so that I know what Dr. Glover, you have some time constraints because you want to make sure that you're available for the communication meeting. Do
Right.
you have an end time for us that?
Just enough time for me to get the next meeting up and running before the 6 o'clock hour.
Okay, so 10 on 5 of?
Yeah, 10 on 5 of either is fine.
Okay.
Just so I can get there and get that up and running for everybody to get that one started.
So, I have a quick, this is not really policy, but is there any way, so you set up the meeting, right, with like as far as WebEx and all that?
Yeah.
So because I usually go to our can it be linked to our calendar? So when I open the calendar, because when I try to today, there's no link on it.
Which calendar did you link to?
To my calendar, like the Board of Ed calendar.
That they're there.
Oh, really? When I click, there's nothing. It just has the meeting. It doesn't have it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It doesn't have the information on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that our regular board meetings do, because that's how I usually log in anyways, but.
Hold on.
Just to, I mean, I'm in now because I went to the website, but.
Sure. Yeah, let me see what I can do there. Because I actually thought that happened already. But let me look. We should be able to get it.
Yeah, no problem. Maybe for next time, just.
Yep.
All right.
So just as we are now meeting on the third Monday, because the second Monday was the Columbus holiday, are you available on the second Monday so that we don't have these back-to-back committees? Is that good to move us to the second Monday?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yep,
So,
I'm good with that.
all right. So we'll set those as our anticipated meeting dates as the second Monday.
Yep. Yeah, because our next one would be the 9th, right? I think of November.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Dr. Glover, you're the one that receives the Policy Pulse?
Yes.
And it does say that that the districts can designate up to 3 individuals to receive these policy communications. If we were to add my name and Jackie's name onto the list, that would keep you from you wouldn't have to worry about forwarding anything to us, and then everybody would receive the pulse.
Yep.
Is that so? I'm assuming you would be the one to make that.
Yeah, I'll ask Gina to go ahead and do that.
Okay, all right, and that way, because it is interesting to see what they have to say. I'd be interested to hear what your reactions were to the 3 policies that they did send us. I could definitely see the extraordinary circumstances one being something that we might really need to consider. I'm not the working parts of remote learning and remote working. Just would like to hear what people's thoughts are on those.
On some of this, I'm going to say we passed some of this in part on a temporary basis last year, but it was a resolution. It wasn't a policy per se.
Right.
We did the policy on the federal funds, if you remember, because the federal funds required a policy, but all the other funding was just, we needed a resolution there. I like the idea of extraordinary circumstances and not anything that's necessarily specific to COVID, because heaven forbid, this is pandemic number 2 for me, so, they have a specific to each instance, doesn't make a ton of sense. To have something in place so that it addresses all those issues. unfortunately, so it's starting to sound like it makes a bunch of sense. As we keep moving forward. The remote working and learning in the same breath, a lot of that is negotiated
Mhm.
with folks. So just to have those parameters set might be at least a good conversation. Now that we have kind of a little meat on our bones, if you will, on this topic, rather than talking about it, just straight, just kind of straight as hypothetical. We're actually doing it. Yeah, I think they all have value. It needs a lot more feathering out, I think, for ideas and what we've been doing, and then how the policy can help support us in doing it better.
Well, one of the things that you and I had talked about when we talked about the calendar, when we did the agenda, is that if we had to go to a remote snow day, is having something like this in place, would that be part of that conversation, or is it they're separate things?
Yes and no. The yes part of it would be acknowledging that emergency snow days would be considered work days. There, and the no part is it depends on how the state presents this as being a day, if you know what I mean. So if the state says it's an emergency day, it's temporary, and it lays out everything for us, there may or may not be a need for a policy that's set. It's all going to end up being negotiated anyway. There, because it would fit into what the working conditions would work for the unit. I think I'd really like to see regulations first before any policy to it, and then see, because if they do that, we'll get another pulse on what a policy might look like for those snow day regulations, and to see what they come up with. Because without regulations, I don't want to commit us to something that we don't need to commit to, or undercommit where we need to.
Right. Because these actually do seem to link to that extraordinary circumstance. And I'm assuming that snow days wouldn't identify an extraordinary circumstance. They'd be.
Yeah.
So is this something that you think is worthwhile to recommend to the board to bring up for consideration? Or do you think we need to do a little more homework on it? Or what are your...
I think it's something we keep kind of pinned up on the lookout for board, kind of just to pay attention to it, and wait to see and kind of follow the lead of what the state does with it, and from there. For the board, it's for a concept. I think it's worth to have one, but we just don't have anything to, other than the concept of the snow day piece. We don't really have any nuts and bolts to talk about yet.
Yeah.
So once we get those, I think that'll give us a little bit more to talk about.
What about the extraordinary circumstance one?
I think we had some conversations about that. And I'm just going to pull that up into there. It's pretty straightforward in its overall approach. I don't know if there's.
It just gives us, we wouldn't have to make any policy changes if something came out in guidance from the state or federal government that was not lined up with our policies, but we would have to follow it anyway but we wouldn't have to make any changes to our policies.
Yeah. The one piece that I know that in talking with us, other superintendents and with the DS and in those level of conversations is about when COVID came through, there was a lot of action and a lot of waivers on just getting a lot of the stuff we normally do out of the way. So changes on the 180-day regulation, changes in what the school day would look like, changes and a lot of changes in the meal and the feeding program and how those would work. And that's where those two regulations came into play about keeping folks employed with the use of grant monies. So something like this in place, that if we got extraordinary circumstances where I needed to be able to act and then have the authority to do that, that would be pretty helpful.
Okay, so are you thinking that we should bring that one forward and leave the other two for further time to let things work through, or should we keep all three in reserve, or?
I think we could talk about the extenuating circumstances. It's the
Okay.
most straightforward of the three. And, just in concept, it's about if this happens, this is what we can do.
Okay,
The remote work piece here is, looks like it's pretty district specific. They're recommending keeping some high level language, but there's a lot more detail how that might or might not work. But the other two, I would say hold on to for now, but the 3520 is something I think we could bring forward to talk about.
Jackie, what are your thoughts? Do you think that's?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm just, I mean, we've been talking a lot about, saving money by working remotely, having some of our programs. We don't want to address this through policy of like what our I understand that you'd have to, negotiate with the union, but I don't know. I feel like if we're talking about moving in that direction, we might want to.
Yeah, we have control over that right now, though.
Okay.
So the piece that we don't want to do is create a policy that might tie our hands, where we lose some control over that, or that we miss something along the way. Whereas, I'm trying to think of an example of how that might apply, where we said we're going to do this, which means we have to keep more people on than we intended. We just don't want anything that gets us hung up to if we say we have to, basically reduce out all the teachers, right?
Okay.
We don't want anything in there to hang up or cause problems with labor relations or any of our legal authorities aboard to be able to do those activities.
Okay.
But I don't see that policy, it's just basically saying that if we had to move to it, the different formats and methods, and that we would try to provide the support that was necessary, and that even though it's remote, everybody needs to comply with district policies and procedures. So it's not, when I read it, I didn't feel that they could limit us. Just, it would be another option.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of read it as expectations.
Yeah. Okay.
Like just what's being expected of if you are in a remote working, scenario, that this is what is expected of you.
Okay.
But I mean,
just bringing it forward just means that, we're bringing it up for conversation. So it doesn't mean, we could bring them forward for a discussion as opposed to recommendation, for adoption at this point. I like your point that if we move in that direction, Jackie, it might be much cleaner if we just lay out the expectations.
Yeah, so it's all clear.
Mm-hmm. So if we can move that, why don't, are we in agreement that we could move them forward for a discussion, let people know that they're out there?
Yep, if you want to.
I mean, I just think it's a good idea to start looking at it. I mean, It just seems a little like it's coming down the line, and if we're prepared, like what happened last spring, if we're just a little bit more prepared and.
Okay.
So you want all three to move forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
For discussion?
Yeah, for discussion.
Okay, good. Great. Now I made a list that they're not, the list that I had is not necessarily the order in which we need to take things. They were just things that had come up in conversation over the summer and early fall, and just I wrote them down in my policy handbook, you know, just to remind me that we needed to discuss it. I'm not married to the order. They just happened to be the order in which they were written down in my book. So there's nothing, if we're in agreement, we can move down the list, or we could, you know, in the time that we have available, or is there something that people feel a little more pressing they want to talk about?
I'm good with that.
Okay. As far as the exit interviews, we did, Bob and I sat down with Karen to complete the interview. So we have, when I went to get the questions that were attached at the time that we adopted the policy, the template is incomplete. So, Dr. Glover, I don't know if you remember the conversation that we had, but it almost looks like the front page. I remember looking at the front page. Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that. But on the back page, it references questions and survey questions and how people answered. And none of the questions were, you couldn't use it without the survey questions. So we actually just added 4 or 5 different questions that addressed, you know, they were.
Was that what you had, or was that what I sent forward to you?
What you forwarded to us, the front questions, it says potential interview questions, Salem Central School District exit interview template. And the first 3 questions we did not use because Karen had been working in the district long enough that those questions weren't really applicable, because it talked about when she first came on as an employee and things change in 12 years. So we didn't use those. We did use 4, 5, and 6. And then if you go on to the back page, in your response to question 2, which is how did you learn about, on this, the front side is how did you learn about the job? You rated the following items and talked about rating it. So the next group of questions don't reflect on the questions on the front of the page, and they really aren't something that we can use in this form. So one of the things that we need to do is go back and take a look at those questions. And I don't know if it's the work of the policy committee or, you know, how we want to do that, but I definitely want to take a look at, you know, and we said that we weren't married to the questions, so we could change them. And that's part of the policy, but we do need to have some mechanism for coming up with questions. And also, one of the things that we ran into is we had, when we talked about doing an exit interview, we talked about having a staff person go to somebody outside their chain of command. But if you have, like, we had Karen, and it was like, who do you have do that? So we talked about, and it got to the point we're trying to get everybody on the same page. Before the day that she was leaving, Mom and I just sat down with her with the questions. And so we really do need to take a look at, you know, including if it's a board team for that, your mid-level administration, because then you're talking to the person. Say Karen was giving an exit interview for Karen Vieira. I'm going backwards, but and then you're talking about their supervisor, and then they're reporting to their supervisor about, you know, concerns or comments that might have been said. So we were trying to avoid that. We just wanted it to be a neutral conversation. So I do think we had gone back and forth about having a team of board members be available to do that. And I do think that is a good option. I don't know if that would require a policy change or whether it's just a procedural process thing for us, or, I mean, we've only done it once, but this is just some thoughts as we went through that process.
The last part of the interview piece I remember was to keep folks out of as you had mentioned, keep folks out of the chain for the hiring pieces, and that was concerned for both board and for superintendent. To that end, there are other means to find folks to interview for exit pieces of a neutral party if we wanted to. For example, I could have reached out to BOCES and said, we need someone to do an exit interview, because we could have had, like, I think Trina Parker, for example, would have been someone to do that, or someone out of their HR department could have stepped in to help out to do those things. Even an administrator or a superintendent from another district could have stepped in to help and provided the board with a report to those things. So there's ways to, kind of keep that neutral piece to it.
Yeah, and I think it's important. And however we do it, I don't know, does it have to go into the policy, or do we just, what do you call it? Some administrative, there's another component part. Regulations.
Yeah.
Would it go in regulations, or does it go in policy?
I think we tried to keep everything else in the policy on this one.
Okay.
If I remember right. Yeah. I'm not looking over the top of you. I am. There's a screen behind this screen that I'm looking up some more of the details on the policy. That's there, but probably should be something to add it in to hammer it out, because that was, I remember, part of our conversation of, being particular of when this person leaves, who does the interview process there. There's another piece, and I can't remember if it's in there or not. I would have to relook at it on what do we do with that interview when it's done.
Right, and we have it, and just have not, followed up. Just trying to get everybody on the same page to do that is somewhat difficult.
Oh yeah. But even once we're, it ends up being an executive session conversation, say this week, right? We go through, we talk about, this is what Karen's exit interview was, and part of what we had. Then when that paperwork's done, it's really it's a personnel piece. Does it go into her folder? And then that all goes, unless there's something that needs some type of action onto it of an official
I thought
legal
we
matter.
made the determination that it would not go in anybody's folder. It would just be separate from that. But
that I bring that up as that is part of that conversation of the rest of the process to go. And where do they go from there? So I think there's a couple things we could bring back on this piece of it. I've written down to refine that final survey piece, because I have it in two pieces in the folder. But what I sent to you came off of the board agenda, so I thought that was the final. But refine that final to
the board agenda. It's not connected. There's two. It's like part A and part B. So
So let me redig and see what I can find for the survey piece of it. But it does sound like there's a couple. Okay, what happens when it's an administrator?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens to the survey when it's done?
Mm-hmm. So we still have some work to do there. So the questionnaire, are you saying that you're going to look back in your notes to see if you have? Okay.
Yep, I'm gonna see where I can set and found it, because I have my notes on a couple others. There's the notes on one. There's the notes on the other. I got the pieces. Somewhere I have to have the part. Put them all together.
That's what I was doing when I first came on. I also have that policy folder. I was doing the same thing. So, but I couldn't find
the short part to it is if we don't have it, I'll rebuild it and we'll relook at it.
Okay. And
worst comes to worst.
So, as far as language for who's going to provide that neutral option for the advisory positions, is that something you want to work on the language? Do you want us to look on the language?
I can stretch back out, because the attorney really gave us most of the language on this. I think Scott did that, or one of the new training guys at Gervin and Filazzo. I can reach back out to them and say, we ran into these situations. What's the recommendation, and how might we alter a policy to address these things?
Okay, because one of the things I do remember that conversation had to do with team of board members.
Okay.
So
I'll take all three of these items and
so you will follow
to Scott or whoever for a follow up on them. and we'll go from there.
Okay, all right. So, I think it will be a useful tool for us as far as, opening up some conversations about the organization. So I think that will be a positive thing. Jackie, that addition, that the board action calendar was, you called it an action calendar. I called it a timeline. We were actually talking about the same thing.
Okay.
I didn't realize you had written action calendar on it. So one of the things that's here, we do have a list of required policies, and we haven't adhered to our action calendar. So I know that we're going to have to build in some of these reviews. The attendance policy requires a review annually, but I think there's a caveat if you have a change in your attendance or something, but probably the best course of practice is to review it. How is attendance happening now?
It is very interesting how attendance is happening now. The kids who are here are getting attendance taken as they are normally. Everyone else who's remote has a check-in question, and kids are expected by a certain period of time to check in, and then teachers translate that information back into School Tool, so we have it as part of record. And then that's a little bit of a process that they go through to get the student record into School Tool on a daily basis. Julie and Karen can have much more information on that.
Yeah.
Too there, but that's the basics as I understand it. And then when they're not there, we did turn off the auto phone calls because the timing, we just couldn't hit the timing. So someone would do their check-in question, the teacher didn't get to the check-in question in time. They get a phone call home saying their son didn't check in or their daughter didn't check in, and then it creates a communication kind of mess. So we stopped the auto calls for now to get these pieces. Calls are still going out if for missing a student, but not through the auto caller as they had previously.
You getting a good return on that?
I haven't seen updated recently that's there. I know they're putting a ton of work into it to try to keep it as accurate as possible. Every time we have something new show up, like a fire drill, it just tells us there's something new we need to figure out and how our attendance is taken, because we can't just look at our list anymore. It has to be the right list at the right time, and we have to make sure they're in-person people and not remote people that we're looking for. So we're not looking for, Calvin Glover on a Purple Tuesday because he's not in school on Purple Tuesdays. He's home because he doesn't come until Gold Day. So,
yeah. So is this something that you're receiving additional guidance on, or is this something that we have to work through, or?
No, this really is about trying to get the mechanics of the student information system to work.
Okay.
In the setup, there isn't a policy change. Expectations for school attendance are still expectations for school attendance. There's still legal absences, illegal absences. This is an example. My youngest didn't check in time the other day. My wife wrote him a note because he was at a doctor's appointment. Is everyone following those processes? Probably not, but they didn't also during the regular school year when we didn't have these pieces going on. So I don't see any need for a policy change to this. It's just how we're working through the kind of the semantics of keeping as accurate attendance as we can.
Okay. Because that's a requirement, and you have listed some in October, and then we do have other ones, the purchasing, and there's other budgetary ones that are required for us to do that. Plus, I think we said we would do that in our corrective action plan when from the audit.
Yeah. Some of these are required. Some of these were best practices out of NISBA at one point had put out a calendar that looked very similar to this.
Yeah.
So some of them are what they're just recommending as best practices, but the ones you just alluded to through the audit on the purchasing process and the acquisitions pieces, which were related to some of the budget pieces in there were ones that we needed to look at.
Okay. So is that something that, I mean, we're off track because you had put in October, there's some that we don't have any, on the agenda for consideration. So should we look at putting together a packet of the,
Well, and when we talked about this last year, we talked about, actually, I think it was the beginning of this year, we talked about the work on these policies coming to this committee
Mhm.
to do the review of these things. Then if this committee decided it needed to go to the board, it would go after that.
well, you have board review, so I would.
That's
assume-
based on language based off last year's actions. And this is our document, so we can do with it, as we want. If we want to change it, we can change it. But that's how we want to do it.
All right, it's just, I don't know, I didn't create this, so I don't know what your thought process was in where you put the different things. I'm just asking that when we come to take a look at the ones that have to do with the finance, if we put them all together,
Mhm.
is that something that we should look at first and then bring to the board? Is that?
That's what he had suggested. When I put this together, I put them in spots and places that kept them spread out a little bit, but in areas that was somewhat related to what the board would do. For example, in July, the admin regulations and policy process for July. Beginning of the year, looking over our policy process, how we make our policies, how we do our policies, was all put into place at that time. That's when we do our organizational chart. It's the beginning of our school year, so it made some sense to do it then. Safety plans a requirement for the public hearing. We actually review that sooner. Board approval of the code of conduct isn't required until really till August. But we put it into there because generally by June, the school committees had gone through everything in order to be able to present it to the board. The attendance policy in August was just looking at it before the school year. But as you said, it's about data, not necessarily about the policy. It requires an annual review. It doesn't require the bigger changes unless it's a policy change. Safety plan approval is state timeline because that has to be approved. I want to say before September 1st because we have to have it distributed by October 1st. Internet safety is reviewed only if it's needed. So if there's a change, I believe is when that needed to come into play. Property tax and budget calendar, there are no requirements to. Those were good practice items. And I believe the school tax changes, I would have to look at that again, but if there were any changes, and I want to say if it had anything to do with, like doing any deferments or anything like that, like we had the senior deferments and those pieces were things that might have required a public hearing. And the budget calendar should support its budget calendar for how you want to do a calendar in the year. The next three in December are all in preparation for the budget. We've started the budget process a bit there in planning stages. The direct investments, I believe, was part of our audit conversation. The January, again, was the budget. Code of conduct was the beginning of the look at the code of conduct, so it could be passed by the summer. March is just the budget itself. It's not necessarily policy, it's just budget. April, again, was the last look at the budget before we'd have to go to voters. And the organizational meeting was basically in preparation for July. Required notifications is what we send out over the summer. We just review those documents. Again, past practice. Public hearing on the code of, we lost Jackie. I don't know how long ago we lost Jackie. She went to JNN.
Yeah. Oh, there she
is. She's coming back. There she is.
Sorry about that. I just got kicked off for a second.
Yeah, well, short nap, no problem. Required notifications are just what we send out every year over the summer. Code of conduct is that review for the public hearing that's required. May is budget because we're required to have a budget hearing for the budget before the vote. And then, of course, the vote, which we actually learned you don't have to vote on. in some of the craziness of this year. And June we left open because June is busy enough. So they're somewhat connected to activity that the board does during the year, but there's certainly room to move things around if the committee wants to move them around.
So are you because I guess when I saw this, I thought since you had locked it in for review that you were ready to bring those things forward to do that. So, but if that's not the case, then we need to have another column for the committee to get these things ready so that it's offset, so that we make sure that if those are the things that you're targeting for board review, that we have whatever information and background that we need to either say we're good or, if we need to suggest any changes. So I would suggest if we do follow this, that we add another column that says, the committee action.
Yep.
The committee review.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that we're ready for that.
Okay.
Also, another thing that's on the list that I have for annual review is Title I parent and family engagement that needs to be reviewed annually. Is that something?
That's not a board review, though.
Who does that?
That's done by stakeholders committee. Does that. Variety of parents and teachers and principals and community members and those folks where I share with them the ideas that we are working on, and we talked about some of the planning, where some of that money is going to go, and we back and forth a little bit about that information as part of the collaboration piece requirement for the title grant. That's not a board activity.
Oh, okay, because I'm looking at a list of legally required policies, and it is Title I parent and family engagement, and policy must be reviewed annually.
Yeah. That's always been, to my knowledge, that has always been, in all my years of doing it, has always been a stakeholders group. It hasn't been a policy review. It's been about the expense plan and the plan for the use of those funds.
And I'm not disagreeing that shouldn't take place. It's just that this is a NISBA list, and it just says, so all the other ones says policy review. So I don't know why I would say that if we didn't need to do that. So where would you find that whether is it in federal law
both state and fed.
Okay.
The state has all the information. It's federal money, but it flows through the state.
But it's got to be included in some federal document someplace.
Oh yeah, ESSA, all the ESSA work is funded through title.
All right. Well, I mean, it's just you had mentioned your list, and it was one that I had pulled off and stuck in my folder too. So,
so do you want the title policy is added to the?
Well, only
for the review,
and that might be something to further check. It just had listed as a policy review. So if we do this, if we went ahead, February, board's not going to review the code of conduct. That's just.
Actually, there's no February. Mine. What do you have in February?
I have code of conduct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Unless this document that I have is dated 10/4/19, and that's the last one I have for board action calendar.
Yeah, Gina might have mine. I might be looking at an older version. Okay. If the board's going to review the policy for the Title I, we need to do it much sooner than February.
Oh, that's fine.
We need to do it September, October, November. So if there's any changes done to it, they're done in advance of doing the other work that needs to get done.
Is that something that should go in with the attendance?
It could.
Why don't we put it there then?
Okay.
And the code of conduct is down on my list too, because we still need to have more stakeholders involved in the review. And we we had an aborted attempt at a public hearing. So I do think that, I don't know if we've ever adopted it.
No, you haven't.
So we don't have a new one. So that is something that we need to bring back up for conversation. So if you have it written in February, so we're not prepared. It's not in your thought that they would be preparing it now
No.
to start the preparation in February.
No, the thought process is the board looks at it first.
Okay.
So the board sees it and looks at it first, can have its input, questions, things it wants to make sure is addressed, and all those pieces in place. So that when the administration goes forward to work with the other stakeholders in building the code of conduct to put it together, it starts off with a parameter set by the board. So when it comes back to the board and it goes through the public hearing pieces of it, you can see this is what we wanted to see into it. And then at the end of it, you can see where it was to
Okay.
there, so it can move forward for adoption after that.
Okay, so that makes sense. All right. So we should make sure that we get that on the agenda and make sure for February that we have that conversation. Plus, we have to deal with this year's. So, all right. So how would you suggest that we handle that? The code of conduct? The one that we, because we haven't adopted it.
Well, the board needs to let us know what it needs in order to adopt it, so we can get those pieces taken care of, so we can get it adopted.
Well, we need a real public hearing. So the one we had the access was, it really compromised the whole thing.
Our 4 o'clock meeting, was that when we
Uh,
did it? Was that in, or no?
All I remember is that,
Was it our first in-person one or something?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Was that at 4 o'clock?
I feel like it was an early one, or maybe our second one or something.
I
but-
think you're right. So we had a lot of issues, so I don't think we could call ourselves a public hearing, so
Yeah.
we do have to take a look at that. Okay. All right. One of the things, I'm watching the time, is that volunteer coaches keeps coming up in conversation. And I know that we had a conversation back when we were talking about volunteers as opposed to volunteer coaches. And I'm just wondering whether we need to take a look at this again, because like the exit interviews, we really need clarity in the process and the procedures as how it's going to go forward, and who, like sometimes coaches got the primary coach is asked about the volunteer coaches. Sometimes we act independent of that. I'm just, just so that there's some consistency there. Jackie, you've gone through the process to be identified as a volunteer coach. Has it been the same each time that you've done it?
No. The first time I did it, it was pretty much I sent everything to Mr. Z, and then I just heard about it. The second time when I sent stuff to Mr. Z, I think I got referred to Maura, so then I had to give everything to Maura instead of Mr. Z. So yeah, and then this year I didn't put in for it just because kind of assumed it wasn't going to happen. But yeah, I mean, I just think if we can iron out a clear process and clear procedures of who do you submit all your stuff to? Do you just talk to maybe we set up a policy where it's the varsity coach that, sends everything to the athletic director, and then the athletic director pushes it forward, to the board for approval, is what I was thinking. Like, just because I do think it's inconsistent. Like, if you're, I mean, to be a volunteer coach if I didn't talk to the varsity coach. You know what I mean? Like that's just me that I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't assume that I could just go in, you know. But not everyone might think that way. So maybe, you know, I was just thinking that that might be the way we want to set it up, that it's really the
Oops. she's out.
And she's gone.
Yeah.
Or she's frozen. And now she's gone.
There was an article in today's paper about improved broadband and access to the internet. And there was areas of Salem that were colored purple. So sounds like there might be some movement.
sorry
No?
again.
So we're getting close to the time we said we were going to wrap up. So maybe this is something we'll grab that policy and take a close look at it next time.
Yep.
And we'll talk about the student member on the Board of Education. And Dr. Glover, would you be able to update the chart with that extra column, or do you want me to do that, or?
Nope. Because like I said, I think Gina probably has the original one
Okay,
that's there. So we can just update that and be fine. Yeah, we
Okay.
can do that.
so if we did that and then just shifted everything up a block so that at least the month before, we're considering it
Mhm.
and then moving something forward to the board.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Just for clarification, there are up from item 2, the 3 items from the policy pulse
Mm-hmm.
that we wanted in the executive interviews, the survey, and the code of conduct.
Well, the code of conduct is really not,
Yep, hold on. No, I saw next meeting. It's the wrong next meeting. It's this next
Okay.
meeting. So in those kind of item 2 and item 3, in item 4, do you want those items added to the October board meeting or the November board meeting?
not the October.
Just making sure.
No, I don't think there's enough time.
I'm with you.
No, I think the November, and I'm not sure, actually, right now, the only thing that I'm comfortable moving forward are those 3 policies for consideration from the Policy Pulse from Erie One BOCES. We still have our work to do on the questionnaire.
Okay. Okay, so
Actually,
just the policy pulse that we'll add to the policy review area for
right,
the November meeting. And
Right.
we'll meet again before the next meeting. So if there's
Right.
additional, then we can certainly add it there. But I just wanted to make sure I noted it right.
and I think, and at that point, I don't think there's enough time to get it all out and about, but that we can talk about the action calendar too. Although I don't think the board, I don't think we took any action on it, but we can
Nope.
just let everybody know that, that's what we're working off of.
Yeah, it's a guidance document and
Right.
that, so it's not anything that requires action per se.
Okay. Just to let them know that we'll be working from there.
Okay.
All right. And we did add, the one thing we did add, other than the column, was the Title I
Yep.
review in August.
Yep. Got it.
Right.
August.
And so our next meeting will be November 9th.
Yep.
And is 6 o'clock good, or,
That works for me.
okay? Is that all right, Dr. Glover? 6 o'clock work for you?
That will work.
Okay. All right, very good. So you're off to another meeting, so
I am off to another meeting.
stacking and say hi to your kids for us.
I will.
Okay, I will if I see them.
Yeah.
I am stopping the recording.
All right. See you Wednesday.
And when I leave, you guys will disappear because I'm leaving the meeting because I need to. So
All right.
just